Picture the minutes before everything unraveled. A bright campus afternoon, a stage ringed by white-shirted protectors, and a crowd settling into the rhythm of a routine Kirk appearance. Then the new clip rolls, steady enough to study, close enough to scrutinize, and the familiar story starts to wobble. What had been presented for weeks as textbook close protection now looks, in this cut, uneven. The video's narration walks us through it. A guard drifting a little too far off the flank. A second agent hesitating mid-aisle. A brief break in the human shield, where there should have been overlap. None of it screams catastrophe on its own. But strung together, beat by beat, these moments read like missed cues in a choreography that depends on precision. The camera lingers on patterns that should be predictable. Handoffs, eye lines, spacing, and finds hiccups instead. A protective diamond that narrows when it should widen. A post that shifts at the wrong second. A quick pivot toward the crowd when the principal is moving stage left. The narration doesn't claim proof of a plot. It argues optics and timing. If this team was running a locked formation, why do we see daylight through the seams? Security analysts quoted by the video talk in the language of anomalies, minor deviations that matter because protection is a chain, and chains fail at their thinnest link. What changes most in this telling isn't a single explosive revelation, but the frame. The footage invites viewers to stop assuming competence and start verifying it, to treat the pre-incident sequence not as background noise, but as the preface to everything that followed. The question posed isn't who's to blame, so much as, was this formation truly under control? By the time the clip ends, the video's thesis is clear. The story the public absorbed may have been tidy. This angle is not. Start with the setting. A daytime campus crowd, thousands strong, ringed by buildings and sightlines. Protection was a hybrid. Private detail on the stage, campus police on the perimeter. On paper, that division sounds efficient. In practice, it meant a small private team focused on near-body coverage, while just 6 UVU officers, roughly a quarter of the department, were tasked with the outer ring. No Orem City officers were embedded at showtime. No roof sweeps were conducted, and there were no drones or long-view overwatch to watch the high ground. Entry was free and fluid. No metal detectors, no bag checks, no credential choke points. The structure resembled a conversation, not a hard target event. The firm on the stage, brought in late despite a previously ended contract, fielded 6 to 8 agents in white shirts, some wearing smart glasses capable of live recording. Their remit was close quarters. They had no authority to probe off-campus rooftops or extend surveillance beyond the footprint. That's where the plan's seams begin to show. A crowd this size in a plaza, framed by elevated vantage points, asks for layered control, detection, deterrence, and denial. What the transcript underscores is a plan heavy on deterrence at arm's length and light on detection past the rail. Warnings existed. Months earlier, veteran protectors urged upgrades, portable ballistic glass at the dais, roof monitoring, magnetometers at entry, even discreet protective wear for the principal. Another advisor questioned the wisdom of open-air stops at all, given the recent spike in threats. The advice traveled, the adoption didn't. The tour's own contrast is telling. In Visalia and Arizona, the apparatus swelled. Dozens of police, magnetometers, drones, QR-gated access. At UVU, the posture shrank. Thread through it all is a choice. Accessibility as brand. The principal prized proximity, unfiltered questions, no visible barriers, a handshake-length distance from the crowd. That philosophy helped fill plazas and frame his message. It also stripped away buffers that buy time when seconds matter. By the time the stage lights came up in Orem, the risk factors weren't speculative, they were stacked. Picture the last calm minutes. The plaza hums, phones aloft, students pressing in, until the stage rail is more suggestion than barrier. A witness later recalls standing closer than any of the students, maybe one security guard between him and I. A telling snapshot of how thin the human buffer had become. The detail is present. White shirts visible, earpieces tight. But the geometry keeps shifting. Instead of a fixed diamond around the principal, the team flexes and compresses, tugged by handshakes, selfies, and the constant drift of bodies edging toward the apron. It's good politics, bad geometry. The perimeter breathes when it should lock. Zoom in on the choreography. One agent posts high on the stage left corner, then abandons the perch to plug a gap on the floor. Another steps off the riser to calm a knot of jostling attendees, leaving a blind side along the lectern. The result is not chaos exactly, but a pattern of small compromises, each harmless in isolation, cumulatively important. In the lanes that matter, aisles, stairs, and high ground, coverage looks reactive rather than predictive. No overwatch on rooftops means no early warning. No fixed standoff means no time cushion if something breaks bad. Then there's the clip that detonates online. An agent adjusts his smart glasses, Meta Ray-Ban style, touching the frame once as the principal greets the front row, again a beat later as he crouches near the podium. To a protector, it reads like a mundane check. Start/confirm recording. Reseat the bridge. Cue a teammate. To the crowd, slowed to 0.25x and looped, it feels like a signal, a prelude written in finger taps. That's how ambiguity works in the age of frame-by-frame scrutiny. A habitual gesture becomes a cliffhanger. Taken together, the tape paints a portrait of a security envelope stretched by its own mandate. Accessibility drives proximity. Proximity compresses formations. Compressed formations erase reaction time. Layer on thin perimeter policing, no magnetometers, and zero rooftop sweeps, and the system arrives at showtime already mortgaging seconds it cannot afford. When the moment comes, sudden, surgical, irreversible. The surprise isn't that confusion follows. It's how much of it was foreshadowed in plain sight. It happens in a blink. The plaza's chatter fractures under a sharp report. One pop, then a ripple of stillness that feels louder than any siren. Faces tilt toward the sound, then toward the stage. In that suspended second, you can almost see the decision trees blooming in every mind. Freeze, flee, protect. The detail team doesn't hesitate. Bodies close in, shoulders squared, a living wall forming around the principal as hands reach. One to steady, one to compress, one to clear a path. From the crowd's eye-level phone cams, it looks like a white-shirted cyclone swallowing the lectern and moving fast, off-axis. There's no staging area, no medical bay tucked behind pipe and drape. The nearest hardcover is a waiting SUV, black paint flashing in the sun like a beacon. The team pivots to it in under half a minute, trading textbook triage for distance. Out of the cone, out of the line, out of the unknown. Some watchers would later slow the footage and ask why gloved hands weren't slicked red, why gauze wasn't visible, why there weren't medics sprinting from wings that didn't exist. Others, seasoned protectors, would answer with doctrine. When the threat picture is unclear, move. Treat while you move if you can. But move. It's a decision that divides the internet. Critics argue that an on-site ambulance and trained medics might have bought minutes, the currency that matters most. The team's lead defends the call. Without rooftop overwatch, without a hardened backstage, staying put invited a second strike. The tape supports both readings because the tape is all angles and no context. A hand at the neck, a shoulder guiding, a door yanked open. A human chain dissolving into steel and tinted glass. By the time tires bite asphalt, the scene behind is unspooling. Students pressed flat, officers fanning outward, radios crackling into new urgency. The stage, minutes earlier a forum, is now an absence outlined by tape and questions. In that vacuum, every frame of video becomes a Rorschach. Rescue or retreat? Error or inevitability? What's undeniable is the clock, the only witness that never argues, rolling forward, impartial and unforgiving. The plaza empties by command more than by movement. Shelter in place rolls across phones and loudspeakers, and the crowd turns into eddies, classrooms sealing, doors thudding, blinds snapping shut. Perimeter tape blooms around the fountain while campus officers, thin on numbers, widen their circle with outstretched arms and clipped hand signals. 12:39. And outside units arrive in a rush of decals and long guns, the cadence of radio traffic shifting from confusion to choreography. The stage is no longer a stage. It's a crime scene without a spine yet. Just islands of gear and footprints in dust. And then the second wave hits. Not sirens, but uploads. Shaky rectangles of video throb to life on every platform. One clip zooms into a hand at a collar and pronounces a verdict about what wasn't done. Another loops a tap to smart glasses and calls it a code. A third slows a breath under fabric and declares it smoke. None of these frames carries sound enough for certainty, but certainty is exactly what the feeds begin to mint. Within an hour, hashtags have sorted people into camps. Those who see negligence, those who see necessity, those who see a script. Professionals wade in with unglamorous context. In an unsecured open-air venue, they say, evacuation beats treatment until Overwatch exists. Hands aren't soaked because compression shifts and pathways change. Visible gore is not a metric of care. As for the glasses, a touch is often just a bookmark for later review, the way a pilot taps a gauge. It isn't cinematic, and that's the point. Real procedures rarely are. But the internet rewards spectacle, and so the mundane loses the vote. Behind the screen light, investigators start the long math. Grid the plaza. Lock the roof lines. Pull badge logs. Request university camera archives. Freeze the stage as evidence. That last step sputters. Private crews begin packing cases and pulling cards before federal teams fully assert control. And a new argument blooms about chain of custody. It will matter later, in hearings and sidebars and reports dense with acronyms. In the moment, what matters to most is smaller and sharper. Did someone miss the rooftop? Should there have been medics on standby? Why did a black SUV outrun the ambulance that never arrived? By mid-afternoon, the campus is a hush broken only by rotor wash and the metronome of evidence markers. Off-site, a hospital clock writes its own brutal timeline. Online, the story splinters again and again, each replay becoming a mirror for what viewers already fear or believe. Between those worlds, on the asphalt where chalk numbers meet shoe prints, facts begin their slower, lonelier work. By late afternoon, the investigation has a spine, a rooftop, a footprint, a name. Technicians sweep the Lyceum's upper decks in tight, methodical arcs. Gloved hands lifting fibers. Cameras stitching a lattice of angles that will later become courtroom exhibits. They log a long-range device. Shoe impressions in gray dust. Partial prints that crunch into a match. On paper, the arc is clean. Elevated position, line of sight, a single actor. It is the kind of narrative that calms command posts and fits neatly inside a press briefing. But narratives are one thing, timelines are another. 15 minutes after the crowd ruptured, a rumor plants itself. Ordinary as a receipt. A stop at a Dairy Queen. Witnesses remembering a face. A door chime. A register beep. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe misidentification. Maybe exactly as banal as it sounds. Still, the detail refuses to behave. It doesn't harmonize with panic or flight. It sits there, room temperature and strange. The sort of fact investigators either reconcile or remove with evidence. Online, it becomes a thread people won't stop pulling. 3 days on, The name at the center, Tyler Robinson, arrives with a lawyer and a father and turns himself in. It should simplify things. Instead, it sharpens the questions that already had edges. Why surrender if escape was the plan? Why linger nearby if disappearance was the goal? Where is the motive sturdy enough to hold the weight of this day? Prosecutors announce aggravated murder, the maximum on the table. The affidavit recites recovered items and probable cause. The public statement is crisp. The silence around why is cavernous. Complicating trust, a separate skirmish opens at the stage. Before federal teams fully assert custody, private hands coil cables, lift cases, pull SD cards. Later, an attorney general's review will glare at that window. No charges filed, but the breach acknowledged. Chain of custody isn't an internet phrase. It is the spine that keeps facts from collapsing. Even a perception of looseness invites doubt, and doubt multiplies faster than data. Meanwhile, experts swat away the tidier conspiracies. The exploding mic is a lav, not a detonator. A sleeve tug is comfort, not code. Liquid patterns don't behave like theatrics. Those corrections are useful, but they don't touch the more durable critique. Rooflines unscanned, medics unscheduled. A hybrid security model with seams that widened under stress. So the official story holds its line. One shooter, rooftop evidence, a community in mourning. And the unofficial story keeps breathing. A soft-spoken errand after a hard act. A father's call. A surrender. A motive shaped like fog. Between them sits the work no briefing can hurry. Stitching a clean timeline through a day that resisted one. By the end of week 1, the case lives in 2 places at once. In conference rooms, investigators pin times to maps, stack exhibits, and strip speculation down to items that can be photographed, weighed, or matched. Online, the same day is stretched, slowed, and looped until ordinary gestures look like choreography and compression artifacts are promoted to clues. A sleeve is tugged, becomes a signal. A lavalier's dark button becomes a device. A puff of fabric under a shirt becomes smoke. Each clip is cropped a little tighter. Each replay adds certainty that wasn't there a moment before. It's not malice so much as math. Millions of eyes will always find more what-ifs than a handful of sworn statements. The footage itself conspires, not with intent, but with physics. Phones shake. Autofocus hunts, audio pops. When images degrade, the human brain supplies meaning. A tilt of the camera erases context. A freeze frame invents intent. What begins as curiosity calcifies into narrative, and narrative, shared, liked, stitched, hardens into belief. Into that noise, experts try to speak a duller language. A production tech points to the lav mic's placement and wiring path. A protective detail veteran demonstrates how proximity work prioritizes movement over treatment in an open environment. A forensic analyst reruns the liquid bag claim and shows why fluid spread patterns don't match stagecraft. These aren't thrilling debunks. They are thermostats in a room that keeps heating itself. Institutions, feeling the blast of doubt, move to close seams. UVU commissions an independent security review. The findings are not cinematic, no grand conspiracy, but clear structural failings. Too few officers for crowd size, unclear command authority in a hybrid model, no elevated overwatch, no med assets staged. Recommendations follow. Federal coordination for high-risk speakers, layered screening, roofline control, on-site EMS, unified comms, procedural, unglamorous, necessary. When the memorial arrives at Utah State, the pendulum swings to over-prepare. Federal teams, SWAT elements, drones overhead, layered barricades, med tents humming, an ad hoc blueprint for how these events must now be built. It feels different, less intimate, more industrial. The price of never again is paid in distance. And yet, even as policies tighten, The meta-story keeps widening. For some, the official arc, one actor, one roof, one terrible minute, feels too spare to carry their grief or fury. For others, the very existence of process is the reassurance, not perfect, but accountable. Between them is a country practicing two kinds of evidence, the kind that holds up in court and the kind that spreads in a feed. Until the first speaks more often, the second will keep filling the silence. Within minutes of the chaos, the campus transforms from a quad to a crime scene. Perimeter tape goes up, radios crackle, and the FBI folds in beside local agencies to freeze time where it stood. Investigators climb stairwells to the Lyceum roof and begin the slow harvest of facts that don't argue. A long-range device recovered. Impressions in dusty membrane that look like Converse treads. Latent prints matched to a single name. On paper it reads cleanly. Too cleanly for a day that felt anything but. Then the tidy outline blurs. Barely 40 minutes after the principal is evacuated, members of the private detail and event staff begin striking the set, coiling cable, pulling SD cards, boxing cameras. To technicians, it looks like muscle memory. To investigators, it looks like a breach in the chain of custody. The state attorney general opens a parallel review for possible obstruction. No charges follow, but the damage is procedural as much as perceptual. Once a scene is disturbed, every later answer has to swim upstream. 3 days on, a new current. The named suspect walks in with family and turns himself over. Prosecutors file aggravated murder and stack enhancements, confident in the roofline story. What they don't file is motive. That blank space becomes the loudest paragraph in the indictment. Into it rush rumors that after leaving the campus, the suspect stopped at a Dairy Queen, that the store closed weeks later. That calm equals calculation. None of it changes the physical map, but each detail, repeated enough, feels like gravity. Back at the beginning, technicians try to seal the cracks they can. Timeline reconciled to dispatch logs. Custody forms stapled to the few devices whose provenance is certain. Statements taken, who touched what, when, and why. It is the unglamorous labor of building a case that will one day have to stand under oath, not trend under a hashtag. Still, two realities persist side by side. In one, evidence is a noun, bagged, labeled, signed for. In the other, evidence is a feeling. This doesn't sit right. That gesture looked off. Why no ambulance on site? The official narrative advances in inches. The public one sprints in loops. Between them sits a question no lab can test. If the process stumbled in the open, too few officers, no overwatch, no med staging. Why should anyone trust the parts of the night we can't see? Until that trust is earned, every confirmed fact will carry the shadow of what might have been. When the sirens faded and the tape came down, institutions did what institutions do. They convened panels, wrote timelines, and tried to turn shock into procedure. Utah Valley University commissioned an outside review that pulled no punches about the hybrid model used that day. Private detail tight on the dais, campus police thin on the perimeter, and nobody looking up. The findings didn't accuse the team nearest to the stage of malice or indifference. They accused the plan of being built for a calm afternoon, not a contested one. Recommendations read like a checklist of lessons learned the hard way. Roof and window overwatch, drone or camera sky cover, controlled entry with magnetometers, medical staging inside the hot zone, unified command so radio traffic isn't split by badges and logos, and a clearly marked egress that isn't shared with the crowd. The pivot was immediate and visible. Less than 3 weeks later, the memorial service that carried Charlie Kirk's name rolled out security normally reserved for national ceremonies, federal assets on site, SWAT positioned out of sight lines, layered checkpoints, long-lens overwatch scanning rooftops and catwalks. What had been marketed for years as radical accessibility was refitted as measured proximity. closer than a politician behind a velvet rope, farther than an arm's length in a scrum. The message was unspoken but unmistakable. Openness is a philosophy, not a tactic. And yet, procedures don't repair trust on their own. Students and staff saw the same footage everyone else did. They also stood in the same lockdowns and read the same rumors. Administrators asked for patience. State leaders asked for civility. And campus police asked for resources. But the campus commons had already moved online, where edits outrun affidavits. Surveys cited in local coverage suggested broad anxiety about political violence and a public split over how much security is too much when speech itself is the draw. That leaves universities with a paradox to manage, not a problem to solve. Build higher walls around the stage while convincing the audience the conversation is still happening in the square. In the aftermath, the new playbook is thicker, the gear more visible, and the distance, literal and figurative, just a little wider than before. When the last frame stops looping and the campus lawns are quiet again, we're left with something bigger than a case file. A mirror. The new clips, the contradictory timelines, the gaps in planning. Each has become raw material for 1,000 competing narratives. Some people see a cascade of preventable errors. Others stitch together symbols and coincidences until a pattern appears inevitable. Between those camps sits a larger, more uncomfortable truth. In an age where anyone can edit meaning out of moments, the burden of sense-making falls on all of us. That burden starts with pace. Institutions move with affidavits and chain of custody forms. Social feeds move with speed. The lag between those clocks isn't just inconvenient, it's the oxygen conspiracy needs to burn. But skepticism doesn't have to curdle into cynicism. It can be disciplined. Ask what a clip doesn't show, who filmed it, what angle is missing, which claim could be tested tomorrow. Demand timelines, not vibes. Procedures, not platitudes. And when corrections come, because they will, hold the same energy for updates as for outrage. It also asks for proportion. Robust security is not an admission of plot. It's an acknowledgement of risk in a polarized square. Honest grief doesn't always look the way a stranger expects it to, and a gesture caught at 240p is a poor proxy for intent. We can insist on accountability without appointing villains by montage. We can honor a life without turning it into a cudgel. Most of all, it asks for stewardship of the commons. The lecture hall, the plaza, the comment thread, these are all stages now. Share carefully. Source relentlessly. Resist the thrill of the too tidy answer. Let experts be boring, and let boring be reassuring. If a story still has holes, say so. If a rumor has no spine, drop it. There is courage in restraint. A man walked onto a campus to argue in public and never walked back off. The policies will tighten. The perimeters will grow. But the measure of our response isn't just thicker binders and taller barricades. It's whether we can keep a space, physical and digital, where sharp ideas travel safely, where questions outnumber accusations, and where grief isn't mined for clicks. If we can manage that, the final lesson of this footage won't be fear. It will be care.